Israeli occupation army perpetrated a new massacre in the northern Gaza Strip, where locals were waiting for the arrival of trucks with humanitarian aid. In Syria, Israeli fighter jets carried out missile strikes on the towns of Hiyera and Sayeda Zainab, 10 kilometers away from the capital, Damascus. And Honduran Foreign Ministry announced that the country would assume the temporary presidency of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC. Hello and welcome to From the South. My name is Belén de los Santos, and from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba, we begin with the news. Palestinian authorities announced on Thursday that the Israeli occupation army perpetrated a new massacre in the northern Gaza Strip, where locals were waiting for the arrival of trucks with humanitarian aid. Preliminary reports indicated that more than 100 people were killed as Israeli snipers and tanks opened fire on hundreds waiting to receive food supplies in the Rashid Street. In this regard, the Ministry of Health in Gaza indicated that wounded were transferred to the Al-Shifa hospital, a health center that they already warned is facing lack of supplies to care for all these patients. It's worth noting that these crimes occur while the citizens of Gaza are suffering from unprecedented levels of acute food insecurity and hunger. The Egyptian Defense Ministry released footage showing humanitarian aid packages from Egypt and the United Arab Emirates being dropped over the Gaza Strip. Egyptian Minister of Social Solidarity, Nif El-Kabak, stated on Thursday that Egypt has sent nearly 200,000 tons of humanitarian aid to Gaza, accounting for 60% of the total aid from more than 37 countries. The United Arab Emirates, in joint cooperation with Egypt, has also sent several packages of food and medical supplies to Gaza. On the other hand, aid agencies point out that despite the fact that the aid packages are being sent continuously, famine is imminent in the northern part of the Strip. In Palestine, the government denounced the Israeli regime's plans to expand and deepen Jewish settlements in the occupied territories while increasing aggressions against the Gaza Strip. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates criticized in a statement that the Israeli right wing in power exploits the global concern over the genocidal war against the people in Gaza to further its colonial aims in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem. In this regard, they warned about Benjamin Netanyahu's government's new plan to build a new settlement east of the city of Etlem. They also denounced colonialism in all its forms and the armed attacks against Palestinian citizens, including children. Meanwhile, on Thursday, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk told the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva that Israel's planned ground assault on Rafah in the Gaza Strip would contravene orders issued by the highest court of the United Nations. In this regard, the UN Human Rights Chief declared that the ground operation announced by the administration of Benjamin Netanyahu is inconsistent with the binding interim measures issued by the International Court of Justice. It should be noted that on January 26, the ICJ, while not ordering an immediate cessation of the war in Gaza, it did declare that Israel must prevent the commission of all acts linked to genocide. In turn, Israeli Prime Minister maintains his positions on the land incursion in Rafah. For his part, Volker Turk reiterated that an Israeli ground attack on Rafah would take the nightmare being inflicted on more than 1.5 million people in Gaza to a whole new dimension.
Today, the total number of people killed has exceeded 30,000. And tens of thousands of people are missing, many presumed buried under the rubble of their homes. This is carnage. Let me be absolutely clear and issue yet another stark warning. The prospect of an Israeli ground assault on Rafah would take the nightmare being inflicted on people in Gaza to a new dimension. Over 1.5 million people are sheltering in Rafah despite continuing bombardment, and it has become Gaza's humanitarian hub.
On Thursday, Sudanese Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan met with his Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in Cairo. According to a statement issued by the Sudanese Ruling Sovereignty Council, during the joint bilateral talks, they discussed ways to strengthen the relations between their nations, as well as the issue of de-escalation of the situation in Sudan. It should be noted that this meeting takes place in the context where the war in Sudan between the army and the paramilitary rapid support forces is entering its 11th month. According to UN experts, the war has killed tens of thousands of people, including up to 15,000 in the city of West Darfur, and has also devastated the economy of the country, destroyed infrastructure, and forced more than 8 million people to flee their homes. Meanwhile, on Thursday in Syria, Israeli fighter jets carried out missile strikes on the towns of Hiyera and Sayeda Zainab, 10 kilometers south of the capital, Damascus. Through social networks, local media disseminated images of the attacks and of the firefighting teams trying to extinguish the fires generated by the bombings. The Syrian Ministry of Defense reported that the air defense systems were activated to repel the attacks, which occurred at 9:35 p.m. local time, which were aimed at several points in the rural areas of Damascus. The Syrian government denounces the constant Israeli attacks, asserting that they constitute a violation of its sovereignty and of international law. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs urged the United Nations Security Council to fulfill its responsibilities and put an end to these aggressions. And the Asian tradition of making Syrian olive oil soap is one of the main expressions of Syria's millenary handicraft heritage. The Syrians claim that thanks to its unique production process and the properties of its natural ingredients, it has become a unique soap in the world. Let's watch the following report by our Syrian correspondent, Hisham Wanous.
It all begins in November with the harvesting of the olives from which the olive oil will later be extracted. As an essential ingredient in the formula of this soap, it is simmered with caustic soda and water until a paste is formed, to which the laurel oil is added. While the mixture is in progress, the floor should be covered with soap powder flakes so that the liquid does not adhere to the cement. The 60 degrees Celsius hot solution with a honey-like consistency and a dark green color is poured onto the stone floors of the large drying chambers, where it is leveled with a comb to make sure it is 6 centimeters deep and left there for 2 days to cool and harden.
I started working in this trade in 1967 and have been working for more than 30 years, and now I am retired. But I still come to the factory to help because this trade is already part of my life and I cannot abandon it. Handmade soap making is a beautiful traditional craft that I inherited from my father, and in this old factory we still make soap with the traditional method where we cook the olive oil and the other ingredients manually with ancient methods, so we preserve this family business and this craft that is an essential part of the history of our city and our whole country.
The soap is ready when it is hard enough. Workers sprinkle stone dust so as not to slide when stretching an ink-soaked cord on the floor to mark the boundaries before cutting the soap very carefully so as not to crush it, with the use of a rake that requires 5 people to operate it. The resulting soaps have a more or less cubic shape and are stamped with the factory's handcraft stamp. Finally, they are stored for 6 months in a cool, dark, dry place, arranged in attractive vertical shapes, usually a cylinder, a pyramid, or a dome. Air and the passage of time cause the soap to mature and dry with a brown crust and a spectacular deep green interior, which are its characteristic colors.
La humedad y el calor pueden arruinar la pasta.
Humidity and heat can ruin the past, which is why it is worked in stone buildings that preserve the right temperature for the soap to cool and dry, and then coated in a unified form and with a determined weight, and then stored in a cylindrical form that allows air circulation until it cures for several months.
The manufacture of the traditional Syrian olive oil soap dates back to 2000 years before Christ, and from the Syrian city of Aleppo it reached Europe in the Middle Ages at the time of the Crusades. A product that stands out for the medicinal properties of its ingredients and for being completely biodegradable, and that even though the process of its handmade elaboration has evolved over time and new methods have been introduced that allow the addition of fragrances such as lavender, mint, and chamomile, it still competes with the new perfumed soaps and remains a family business that is passed on from generation to generation in Syria.
Hisham Wannous, TeleSUR, Damascus, Syria.
And now let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the south. In Bolivia, authorities declared a state of emergency in the Amazonian city of Cobija due to the heavy rainfall that has affected an estimated of 570 families. According to the Risk Management Unit of the Mayor's office in Cobija, between Tuesday and Wednesday, the Acre River reached a level of 15.83 meters, affecting 14 neighborhoods in the region and surpassing the marks of the year 2015. The inhabitants were evacuated to the shelters with the little they could rescue from their homes, but due to the increase in the water level, the authorities are requesting the establishment of more shelters. The head of the Departmental Education Office of Pando, Guillermo Vargas, stated that the magnitude of the disaster has forced the suspension of classes in all educational units.
If I had the possibility, I will go elsewhere, where the water doesn't reach, because it is difficult to be like this. From there, it is good to come here, and now from here to there, one has to beg someone to take us there, to return. And those filthy things, we have to be joining others to clean up and all that.
In other news, on March 1st, President Xiomara Castro from Honduras will receive the pro-tempore presidency of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, as informed by the Foreign Ministry of Honduras. In its account on the social network X, the Foreign Ministry highlighted that the CELAC is a regional space where the strengthening of Latin American and Caribbean integration and cooperation will be promoted. Castro will take over from the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ralph Gonsalves, where this Caribbean political leader will be in charge of the transfer of power at the summit of CELAC heads of state. Honduras was elected to hold the pro-tempore presidency of CELAC in 2024 in the framework of the summit between the European Union and CELAC, which was held in Brussels, Belgium in July of last year. CELAC was created in the year 2010 and is made up of more than 30 countries of Latin America and the Caribbean. The President of Mexico, Manuel Lopez Obrador, inaugurated on Thursday an important section of the Cancún Playa del Carmen Mayan train, two tourist poles of transcendence for the country's economy. The morning conference was held at the Cancún airport station of the Mayan train, located on the Chichen Itza-Tulum highway in the state of Quintana Roo, from where they made the tour along the Iron Road after the traditional press conference. The president made an apology for the Cancun area, which is visited every year by 20 million Mexicans, not counting foreigners. AMLO also explained that the Mayan train has the facility to solve the problem of transferring visitors to that zone, but he specified that the main reason is to make known the culture of the natives in the deep Mexico and to unite all the Mayan zones of the Mexican southeast. We go now to Venezuela, where social and political organizations mobilized on Thursday to commemorate the 20 years of the Anti-Imperialist Declaration of Commander Hugo Chavez. The great national caravan called La Furia Bolivariana, in which citizens remember this date as the day in which Commander Hugo Chavez reaffirmed the anti-imperialist character of the Bolivarian Revolution with a massive mobilization that expresses the rejection of the economic blockade and the unilateral coercive measures implemented against the Venezuelan people by the United States. The great national caravan of the Bolivarian rage is inspired the thought and commander of Commander Hugo Chavez. We have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and also share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with TeleSUR. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. On Thursday in Pakistan, the parliament celebrated its first swearing-in session of the new members of the lower house. In this context, Pakistani local media highlighted that after the general elections of February 8th, the country faces political instability linked to the problem of the most popular leader of the country, the former Prime Minister Imran Khan, who is in prison and his party is blocked. In this sense, the current scenario suggests that the alliance between the party's Muslim League of Pakistan and the People's Party of Pakistan will allow for former Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif to return to government, even though his name was never among the favorites of the voters. In Russia, President Vladimir Putin delivered the annual State of the Country address to officials and the general public at the General Assembly, where he set the guidelines for further work of his presidency. During his speech, the president asked the Russian population to maintain national unity to face the challenges ahead, referring to the special operation that the nation is currently maintaining in Ukraine. Putin also pointed out that his government is planning methods of military development for the country in the face of the threats from the United States. Russian media report that this speech is crucial as it comes just weeks before the upcoming presidential elections to be held between March 15th and 17th of this year. In his speech, Putin also gave an assessment of the situation in the country and outlined the tasks for the future.
We also understand that the West is trying to get us into an arms race in order to exhaust us and repeat this trick they managed to pull off in the 1980s with the Soviet Union. I'll remind you that in 81 and 88, the Soviet Union military expenditure was 13% of the gross domestic product. So our task is to develop the military complex in such a way as to increase the capabilities of the scientific and industrial complex.
In this context, the Russian president declared that the country's sovereignty is being defended on all fronts and took the opportunity to pay tribute to Russian soldiers who died in the special operation against Ukraine.
Dear friends, the protection of sovereignty is carried out on all fronts. First of all, in the battle zone, where our military are fighting, I thank all of those who defend the interests of the homeland, who run the risk every day, all the people who pay homage to them. We mourn for the dead, and we will always remember our deceased heroes. We pay homage.
In other news, France's Senate on Wednesday adopted a bill to enshrine women's right to abortion in the Constitution. The vote cleared a key hurdle for the legislation promised by President Emmanuel Macron in response to a rollback in abortion rights over the world. Wednesday's vote came after the lower house, the National Assembly, overwhelmingly approved the proposal in January. The measure now goes before a joint session of Parliament for its expected approval by a 3/5 majority next week. Macron said that before the vote that his government is committed to making women's right to abortion irreversible by constitution. In this context, women in France reacted to the French Senate's approval of a bill to introduce abortion into the Constitution. Let's hear.
Yes, it's absolutely essential for today's young people that there are no clandestine abortions like there used to be, with all the medical risk that it entails and all the psychological consequences it has. It's something you never forget. It's a lifelong suffering. We defend this right 200%. It must be a woman's choice. There's no debate about that. But it's true that, at the same time, the protection of this right must not also prevent awareness of what abortion is. It's not the same thing to have an abortion as to take a contraceptive pill. And that we don't also completely stifle the debate on what it is to have an abortion. And if some doctors aren't comfortable with that, I actually understand.
And in Spain, women from a variety of social movements held a demonstration at the European Union's headquarters in Paseo de Gracias Avenue in Barcelona, denouncing the organization's border policy and the legal and economic support to the prosecution of migrants.
From the 8th Assembly, we have decided this year with Regularización Now to organize these days of protest against the borders, just as we did against the genocide in Gaza last Sunday, and also against the precarities in front of the Ministry of Development. What we are here today is repudiate a pact of death, such as the European Pact of Migration and Asylum, that comes to legitimate more death at the border, more criminalization, immigration, a growth in the budget for Frontex, an agency that has multiplied its assets in recent years just to incarcerate, to carry out illegal deportations, and now will be able to legitimate.
Like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and also TikTok. For TeleSUR English, my name is Belén de los Santos. Thank you for watching.